Welcome to another edition of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me this week, guitar legend Uli Jon Roth. We talk about his upcoming tour, The Ultimate Guitar Experience with Jennifer Batten and Andy Timmons. We talk about his latest release, Scorpions Revisited, with Nathan James of Inglorious on vocals. We also look back at his history. We talk Scorpions, Tokyo Tapes, Taken by Force, In Trance. We also go over Jimi Hendrix, Sky Guitar, Sky Academy, and much, much more. Sit back, folks. You've got an hour of great listening in front of you. Remember also to head over to ulijonroth.com to find out everything you need to know about the VIP experience, the tour, and everything else. Let's just get started. Here is Uli Jon Roth. Enjoy. We are speaking with guitar legend Uli Jon Roth, formerly of the Scorpions, and of course, Electric Sun and the solo stuff. Uli, this is a great thrill to be speaking with you today.
Hey, Mitch, the pleasure's mine.
Yeah, and you know, I mentioned this before we started recording. Your career is, 50 years, if not more. I don't know where to start. There's so much, but we'll do
it's not quite 50 years yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Actually, I realized recently that my first ever gig, my first ever concert or whatever, was in 1968. Actually, so when I was 13. Yes. So,
which, by the way, was the year I was born. So,
a lot of water has gone under the bridge, and give it 2 more years, I guess, then it'll be my 50th stage anniversary.
Wow.
Something to celebrate.
So let's talk about the recent stuff. You've got this tour coming up that's going to hit Montreal and Ottawa, and of course every place in between, New York and all that. The Ultimate Guitar Experience with Jennifer Batten and Andy Timmons. Now, of course, Andy played in the band Danger Danger years and years ago. I love Andy. Tell me about the Ultimate Guitar Experience. What are fans going to see?
Well, I thought we're going to do a format which is slightly different. Actually, I was in the G3, as you may know. Some years back, and that went very well. We had, everybody played their set, and at the end we had a 2-song jam session. And I mean, that concept kind of works when you have 3 guitar players. But I thought I wanted to do this a little bit more, even like an integrated show. So first of all, we're all going to use the same band. So it'll be more integrated in that sense. But after I've played my set, which is last, we're going to do a set, all 3 of us. So it's not just going to be a jam session, but it's going to be a little bit more adventurous than that. And, so I picked some songs which I think are going to really work. And
well, let's talk about some of those.
We're
songs.
going to do a real set at the end. I mean, not a very long set, but it'll be more than just a couple of songs, And I'm looking forward to that because because both Andy and Jennifer are great players, and they're people you can work with in a live environment when it comes to a 3-guitar thing, and that doesn't always. That one shouldn't take that for granted, when you have a bunch of guitar slingers on stage.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a disaster,
Sometimes it is, but other times it works great. So, but also
exactly.
let's talk about some of the music you're going to bring back. It's been about 30 years since you've played Electric Sun live, and you're going to bring some of that back to this set.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's been at the back of my mind for some time now. I did the Scorpions Revisited show where I concentrated on the material from my Scorpions era. And then I thought I want to also have a look at the Electric Sun material, and that's starting now. So You're right. We're going to play some songs that I haven't touched for 30-something years. And that'll be very interesting because I've learned something in the meantime, and it'll be exciting to reconnect with that music and and experience a new kind of edge to edge, hopefully with a little maturity.
Yeah, I mean, the Electric Sun stuff was definitely different, but you mentioned Scorpions Revisited, the album, which was absolutely fantastic, and you had a singer on there named Nathan James from the band Inglorious. What was sort of the motivation to get that album done? You've said often that the Scorpions, Electric Sun, and so on don't necessarily represent your musical mind now. Why did you want to revisit it?
Well, they represent more my past. They're
Right.
part of my journey. It's almost like somebody's looking at a photo album or like an old diary, like 30 years later. And, because I never really listened to the old albums as such. And then you see these photographs, and it brings back memories, and you can draw some inspiration from there. But it's really more than that, because these songs, when we wrote them back in the early 70s and 80s, they were very much alive, and there was a certain energy to them. And music that has that kind of quality, you can revisit it, and suddenly it'll speak to you in a completely new way. And I guess that's what I wanted to experience. I wanted to see what happens when I actually take the plunge and start playing some of that stuff and reinterpret it. And in the case of the Scorpions Revisited, that worked ever so well. It was a great experience for me, and actually a learning curve, because I rediscovered things that I had long forgotten about, and that kind of I kind of managed to reignite certain types of sparks which I had, as I said, forgotten about, and integrate them back into my playing, and combine that with a new kind of vision, which comes through my experience of those 50 years, I guess.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was a very, very positive exercise, and it's actually not yet finished, because we're still playing
some of the songs on this tour.
Definitely a collection, because the album did very well in America and Canada, and so we're going to have a best of that album kind of during the set. The set will consist of those songs like Cesar Sharon, In Trance, Will Burn the Sky, Fly to the Rainbow, but also some of the best Electric Sun songs, that my favorites, such as stuff from Astral Skies, I'll Be There, I'm a River, and also even Earthquake,
right?
Which is a bit of an epic. And then we're also playing some more recent material on the tour, So it'll be a very rounded kind of
event
thing, at least for my show. I'm not totally sure what Andy's playing. I spoke to him recently, but I think he will also play a mixed batch. I'm really looking forward to that. And Jennifer is always coming up with the goods. It's always nice to hear her on stage, because she's such a breath of fresh air, I find.
Yeah.
When she goes out just with the screen and she doesn't miss a beat, it's really quite something, So I'm really looking forward to having those two on the tour, because well, they're both sweethearts. That's one thing, because I don't really enjoy dealing with like very difficult people on the road. But apart from that, they're real artists who've got something to say,
Yeah, let me ask you about the Electric Sun stuff. After you decided to leave the Scorpions, it had been said that the classically influenced music was moving sort of into corporate rock, and you weren't really into that mind frame. With Electric Sun, you did something that was completely different and probably alienated some of your fan base along the way. Why did you want to go on such a left turn? Why not just sort of do a Scorpions light or why Electric Sun?
It was what I had to do at that time,
okay.
And yes, at first, the first album when it came out, it did alienate some of the Scorpions fans because a lot of people were hoping that I would go like the way of Virgin Killer and Tokyo Tapes and play all out in a certain way with the whammy blazing, etc. But at that point, I really wasn't interested in that. I felt I had done that with the Scorpions, and I was interested in something completely different. And my mind just took me there. It took me into that realm of Electric Sun. And you're right, it was absolutely different from anything that was on the market at that time in the early 80s, late 70s. The trend was definitely moving towards corporate rock in America and also what then later became known as heavy metal. I mean, in the beginning, they even called Bon Jovi heavy metal, so I wouldn't heavy metal, but at that time they did, And I was kind of completely apart from the mainstream. Like we had a lot of people come to the concerts, and that was always fine. We delivered, but it was I was like one of the few who were still going the Hendrix direction, and I mixed that up with my classical kind of influences. And most other people were moving in a very, very different direction.
Were you afraid though that it might be career suicide, or did a manager say, "Oh my God, listen, Taken by Force was great. What are you doing?"
No, you see, I wasn't afraid. I was really not even actually interested in these things. I mean, I always saw myself more like an artist. Particularly then, I had no concept of career and things like that. I didn't think in these terms. I just thought in terms of what I was interested in artistically, and so yeah. Some people said, "What are you doing? Why did you leave the Scorpions? That's idiotic or whatever." And I said, "Well, I don't really have a choice. It's something I've got to do." And so it was a no-brainer for me, precisely for these reasons that I didn't think in terms of career. If I had thought in terms of career, yes, I would have probably have been swimming in the mainstream, or tried to do to go with the flow of the times that back then. But yeah, it wasn't something that appealed to me. Other people were doing it, and they were doing it very well. So I thought I wanted to do something that nobody else was doing.
Right.
And I did.
Yeah.
And it did have a decent kind of impact, at least. I mean, particularly in England, I remember we were filling big halls at that time with Electric Sun, and our American tour was also very well attended, and in fact, wherever we went, that wasn't the problem. The problem was that recording-wise, I just went completely in a different direction from anybody else, and I think that's what it was. Afterwards, a lot of the people who rejected Earthquake at first seemed to change their mind. So now the album is, seen as a cult album or
right. Well,
very influential, whatever they call it. And that goes for all three Electric Sun albums for different reasons, each one for a different reason. But yeah, at the time, it was certainly not mainstream. It still isn't mainstream, never will be.
No, it's not. It's never been mainstream, but it when it came out, folks sort of went, "Oh, okay." And then 10 years later, 20 years later, people started looking back on it and started saying, "Hey, wow, this is kind of brilliant. What did this guy do here, right?" And so that must have been rewarding for you also. That to finally
I had already moved on,
Right.
Oh, then I'm one of these people, and when it's all said and done, then I kind of lose interest. So once I left Electric Sun behind me, which was in 1985, I was kind of done with that subject. Not that I didn't like Electric Sun, but I also I saw it as just a progression, like a part of my journey, really. And certainly not perfect, but it had moments that I thought were worth something, and we're gonna on this tour now we're gonna play some of the best of those.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Now let's look at the journey a little bit. You really have divided your career into sort of three sections in a sense. You've got the Scorpion Ulis, you've got Electric Sun, and then you've got the solo stuff. Is there a fourth reinvention coming, or are you happy?
I don't know. I'm always reinventing myself in the sense that I don't think too much in terms of styles, and I'm happy to just pick up an instrument and play a piece of music which is like decidedly not anything that I've done before, and it may confuse people. So I've been told that each of the albums I've ever been on, other than the Scorpions ones, was completely different from the previous one, and in fact from all the others. And I guess that's just my nature. I'm always trying to
innovate.
Well, I'm just interested in doing something that I haven't done before. Having said that, I do enjoy interpreting material from the past, or it could also be other people's material, as an interpreter. That's another side of me. But as a writer, I prefer not to say the same thing twice. And that in itself is not exactly very commercial because, people like to, when they go into a pizza parlor, they want to have pizza. When they go to a Chinese, they want to have Chinese food, And with me, it's all a little bit of everything, I guess,
Right.
You might find some Turkish phrasing right next to a Beethoven harmony, right next to a Jimi Hendrix groove, and I don't question these things because to me they sound organic, but sometimes maybe it overstretches people's willingness to stretch
when
a little,
Yeah. Well, people have to grow with the times, but when you left the Scorpions and they went on to this massive success in the 80s, especially in the United States, Rock You Like a Hurricane and all that, at any time were you jealous, or were you more like, oh, thank God I'm not part of that?
You see, I had completely finished that subject in my mind. I didn't follow their track record. I mean, it all passed me by. I wasn't exactly like a hermit, but I didn't listen to anything that was out there in the 80s. So I actually really didn't know what was going on, I heard the Scorpions were on tour, but I never listened to any of the albums. Only later I heard bits and pieces, and then I saw they did some great things, like Send Me an Angel or whatever. Rock You Like a Hurricane is a huge hit and deserves to be a hit. So they got better and better as songwriters, Rudolf and Klaus, and they honed it to perfection, and in that they had the edge over most other bands, I think, who were not in the same league as Rudolf and Klaus. I think that's really what made the band, other than, of course, the it wasn't just the songwriting, it was also the delivery, the style, the timing of it, and the band, of course. But at the heart of it, there were those songs like Rock You Like a Hurricane, or whatever, or Winds of Change, or Send Me an Angel, and
Still Loving You.
So many of these, so many. So their success was totally well deserved. But at that time, I kind of ignored all that because I was more. Those were the years when I had completely moved away from rock, and I didn't even have a band anymore. I was writing symphonies and concertos, So in southern England. And I didn't even tour at that time. There was a period of 13 years altogether where I didn't tour. I only did a handful of shows in that time, all like more casual or symphonic. So no, I had no inclination to feel jealousy. Anyway, I'm not a jealous type,
No, jealous. Now, you mentioned some of the big...
Afterwards, I was a little jealous when I saw that they were always being able to fly in the private jets when we had to take the bus.
Right.
Because
the prop jet, the famous prop, right?
But I guess that's the price I paid.
I'll ask you about one of the songs. One of their greatest songs in the 80s was Still Loving You. That was a song that Rudolf had presented to the band as far back as 76, 77.
They were working on it on and off in the dressing room because Klaus and Rudolf as a team, they used to songwrite in the dressing room a lot. Rudolf would get his guitar and Klaus would sing, and that song was already there, and it was pretty much already like it was later on. And there was a little bit added towards it, but I was familiar with it,
Right.
So some of these songs had quite a long genesis, and some just happened pretty instantly,
Yeah, and Rudolf had said that you had found the song to be too commercial and didn't want to record it, or something like that.
I think I thought it was a little too predictable, but it wasn't really finished at that time, and we had not actually tried it. I would have found the right way for it. When it came down to it in the studio, we always were a very good team, and there were a couple of songs that I rejected, but I didn't reject that one outright. It was just basically not one of my favorites. In fact, it still isn't.
Well, there you go.
I still can't really relate to that one as much, although it was a big hit.
Yeah,
but I would have played my solo.
Speaking of hits, the album Tokyo Tapes, known for renowned as being one of the best live albums ever put together. You almost weren't on it. The band had booked these dates in Japan, but you had left the band and said, "I'm done," and yet they managed to convince you to do these dates. First of all, are you glad that you came on and were part of the album?
Yes, I was. I was glad. I guess I should have also accepted the first American tour. It was a mistake not to do that one. But I was so gung-ho on finally going into the studio and doing my album because my head was brimming with all these new ideas for other pieces of music, which would have kind of absolutely not fit into the framework of the Scorpions.
Right.
So, and I had already stayed there for one more year in the band after I made my decision. So I was kind of like really at the end of that journey, you know. But I was glad that Rudolf and Klaus persuaded me to do Japan and to do the live album at the end, because once we were there, it was a definite highlight, and I felt the band was at that time at a peak, and we were really doing the best stuff that we had been live, that we had been doing. You know, it was kind of like the basically the high point of those 5 years that I was in the band. Right. So, and it was the right thing to do. And the album, yes, it proved very successful, and it's amazing still to this day how often people come with the Tokyo Tapes album for signing. They have the old vinyls, and not a show goes by at the end when there's always somebody with that album.
Yeah, and of course
I'm always signing that picture in the middle, you know, where we're 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, eyes half open, jet lagged, where we're walking the zebra crossing.
Yeah, so, well, I'll definitely bring it in Ottawa, but and they
have just re-released it in Europe, and
I bought it.
And it's got 8
bonus tracks.
Yeah, 8 bonus tracks. Some of them really good. I was very surprised when I heard the bonus tracks, because I hadn't remembered some of them, and yeah, it was very good.
Yeah, the deluxe the 50th anniversary deluxe edition of Tokyo Tapes. If you don't have it, is folks, it's fantastic. It's wonderful. When the album became so successful, though, did you stop for a minute and say, maybe I should go back. Maybe we.
Oh, you see, I didn't realize it was that successful.
Okay.
Because I was doing Electric Sun from then on, and I was concentrating on that. I mean, I saw the paychecks. They were a lot of money was coming in with that album, because it went gold in so many different territories, and gold back then meant a lot. You know, I mean. Right. Nowadays, when an artist sells 10, 20,000 copies, it's almost like a big deal. Back then, Tokyo Tapes, I think, sold like 300,000 in France alone or something like that. You know, at least those were the figures that I was told. So I noticed that. But, I put it behind me, and it was only after the years, you know, that I mean, once I started touring again, people always mentioned that album, and they say Tokyo Tapes, Tokyo Tapes, Tokyo Tapes, and the other bands also, you know, young guitar players would come and say that. Then I started to think, well, what is it with that album, you know? Because when we did it, I never actually listened to it in full, and I wasn't happy with the sound at all, because I remember the sound on stage was so great at Sun Plaza Hall. It was just so uplifting. And then when I listened back to the recordings, I think it sounded nothing like it. You know, I was very disappointed with the overall sound of the album. And, so I kind of completely ignored it. But regardless of the sound or my personal taste there, it became a real success, and I went around the world. Yeah. It opened many doors.
If I may, Jimi Hendrix was a huge influence. What was it particularly about Jimi Hendrix that attracted you, where you just said, wow, I got to be a fan of this guy. I got to check him out?
Well, you want one word?
No,
you know,
give me a whole paragraph.
You could write a book, or you could say one word. And I'd say 2. It was like magic. It was just inspirational. Those 2 words, you know, inspiration and magic. There was something there. There was like a mystery attached. Like, particularly then, people nowadays, young kids, when they listen, maybe they can't really relate to it as much, because they've heard so many dive bombs and so many howling guitars with insane overdrive. With Hendrix, all that was very different, because he was like the first one to do all that, and he did it inside out. When you heard it back then, it was like a revelation. You know, these sounds were definitely from outer space. Nobody had ever done anything like it. It was totally novel. It was more on top of the game than anybody else out there. And it was just fascinating, It drew a lot of people in. And I was one of them, particularly after saw Jimmy play live in early 69, when he was kind of like at the height of his powers, and he didn't even do any show. He was just standing there, but I was like mesmerized, having just turned 14. And I still remember that concert very well, and the ringing in my ears afterwards. But it was a good ringing. So.
A very positive ringing. You've said in the past that part of what you're trying to do is bring classical music to the present, and I think part of that was achieved with the sky guitar, which emulates the higher notes, almost like a violin. Talk to me a little bit about the sky guitar and its genesis and how it came about and what you were trying to do with it and its importance to your sound today.
Yeah, the sky guitar is like a power tool for me, basically. It's unlike any other guitar, and I can do things with it that I can't do on other guitars. In some respects, it's just like other guitars because I can also do all of the standard things that I was able to do on the Strat. I loved the Strat. I still love the Strat. It was based on the Strat, but I wanted it to be able to do more than that. And the first thing was that I wasn't satisfied with the range. The guitar stopped at the C sharp, and you could bend the notes, but it was just never quite enough. I wanted a higher range. You're right, because I was listening to these violin concertos, and I studied that kind of music, and I felt, why can I not do that on the guitar, which they can do on the violin? Because I want to, Sometimes when you're spinning a melody and it starts to soar, it goes higher and higher. You don't want the sky to be limited by a black line and suddenly, oops, you've run out of frets. I want to be able to go just beyond that and maybe then some and then come back. I want to be able to go all the way. And that was not possible on normal guitars, and so that was the first step to come up with a guitar that enables me to play a whole bunch of extra notes at the top, more or less comfortably. And that's how that shape also evolved, because the shape was really evolved through the necessity of being able to play up there, but also I wanted it aesthetically pleasing, at the same time. So it has a dual function. So afterwards, the sky guitar, that was like back in 82. My then manager and friend, Dave Cork, one day he just said, the sky guitar, he just called it sky guitar. And I thought, wow, that's actually a good name, So from then on, it was the sky guitar. And more and more, we built several prototypes, and each one was pushing the envelope, eventually ending up in a 7-string, which was called Mighty Wing, and that guitar was the first one to allow me to play a whole bunch of notes in the bass register, and that added various advantages to the guitar, So then we started experimenting with pickups and other things. The bottom line is the sky guitar for me is like an instrument of pushing the boundaries and basically almost like a new instrument. It's certainly as new, as different from a normal guitar as a viola is from a violin, say, and those are two distinct instruments. So I would say, yes, the sky guitar is a guitar, but it's a guitar with like a whole new octave, also figuratively speaking.
Right. Well, it's there are people that have said out there that it shouldn't be called a guitar. It's a completely new instrument and thus should have its own name.
Completely new. That's just plain wrong, because it is based on the Strat. It's got the original had 6 strings, and I'm still playing a lot of 6-string Sky guitars, particularly for my older music. It's tuned like a standard guitar. It uses the same traditional woods, so it is more like a very advanced variation of a traditional guitar. So it's kind of borderline, you know. Right. It's not a completely new instrument.
It's a Sky guitar.
It's borderline, you know. Right. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a completely different instrument. It's still a guitar, an electric guitar.
An electric guitar. And since we're talking about Sky,
now we've got a new instrument because now I've got a Sky guitar, which I think is another first. It's a dual neck Sky guitar. It's 2 Sky guitars in one. And the lower neck actually has a flamenco style nylon 7 neck. Yes, and I love playing that guitar because it allows me a completely new spectrum of sounds and emotions. It sounds great, and I'm playing it a lot now during our shows.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. I actually haven't seen a picture of that or seen you play that yet.
Well, look at the new website. It's there very prominently on, there's like a Sky guitar section.
Yeah, I'll
see it right away.
Now, I was going to ask you about Sky Academy, but since you mentioned, the sounds of the guitar and all that, what to you is a good solo? What makes a good solo? Because, in the 80s, which is where I sort of cut my teeth with music, it was all about the shredders. It was about playing 1 million notes a minute. Is there a perfect solo? Is there a perfect vibe? Or
yeah, there are several perfect solos in the history of rock music, I think. But they're not necessary. I would maybe pick ones which certain other people might not pick, I would start with a couple of classics. One of them is very, very short. It's actually on the song I Feel Free by Cream. Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton played the perfect solo. He also played a perfect solo in Sunshine of Your Love. And there were several others I felt were perfect solos. Jimmy played some perfect solos. Like one of them is called as the end solo of Axis Brothers Love. That's to me a perfect solo. Or the All Along the Watchtower lead, which is very brief and just almost fragments and themes, but that's perfect. Yeah. So that's my idea of perfection.
Right.
And when playing these songs, I had the pleasure of playing some of these songs with Jack Bruce, for instance, the Cream songs. I grew up with that stuff. Then I tried to play them as note for note as possible because I don't want to mess with something that's perfect, I'm just an interpreter there of something which is so good that it certainly doesn't need any improvement from me or anybody else, It's just a great feeling to be in those footsteps, and each time you do, you learn something. You make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, there's so many things left. I'm trying to look at our time, and we're all this. I know we've gone way over the time. But
I mean, I've got time. You can just edit out what's boring or whatever.
Well, none of it's been boring. That's the problem. But let me ask you then about the Metamorphosis album from what year was that? That was
that came out in 2004.
2000, right?
2003 and I think the original possibly even earlier. Yeah.
You took on Vivaldi's The Four Seasons.
Yeah.
Talk to me about taking that on, because here you are, you're doing this stuff on guitar, and it sounds like an orchestra. Was that sort of a dream?
There was an orchestra.
Well, yeah, no, I know, but I'm just saying that that you managed to make the guitar
Blend.
fit. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, blend. Yeah, well, that one gave me a lot of headaches because exactly of the blending. Because I was very conscious, always when playing with orchestras, very conscious of this Beauty and the Beast kind of dichotomy, where the electric guitar, once it's amplified through an amp, has something inherently a little dirty, gritty about it. And when you play with all these beautifully played string instruments with 400 years of sonic history, like cellos and violas and violins, you are really up against it. It's very easy to sound like a complete moron or like just ugly. To make the guitar blend with that is one of the most difficult things I ever did and I ever do. And to this day, I'm never perfectly happy with the results. But on Metamorphosis, I came very close, I thought. But it did give me a lot of headaches, and it was a struggle to find the right sounds and the right approach. And, it was far from easy. In fact, like taking on that album was, it was madness. Because when I first agreed to playing that in concert, like it was a phone call, and I thought, okay, I can probably do this because Vivaldi's Four Seasons have intrigued me, over the years because it was like one of these all-time great classics, centuries old, but still sounding as fresh. And there's an enigma to it. So I wanted to get closer to that and at the same time bring it into my own world without destroying the spirit, and that's not such an easy thing, easy assignment. And I hope I achieved it in some respects at least.
Yeah.
But when I first saw the score of what the violin was actually playing, and I was turning a little pale because I saw really on paper that a lot of it was kind of unplayable on the guitar, particularly playing it in exactly the same positions, like the high positions, which you wouldn't be able to do that on the Strat or Les Paul. You would have to transpose it down an octave. But once you do that, the entire structure and balance of the orchestra is destroyed, and that would have gone really against the grain of the greatness of this work. So I didn't have that option. I needed to play it exactly as written, and with all the high runs. And on the violin, I do play the violin myself, although I haven't played for many years. But on the violin, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is infinitely easier than on the guitar because it's all written for the violin, and the fingering is so logical with the fifths. On the guitar, some of that stuff is just a minefield. And I really needed to sit down for a few days to find ways of finding new fingerings and new ways of making that possible. And, luckily it worked in the end.
It worked out, yeah.
It's so difficult anymore, but at first it was a little daunting to make it sound like it's easy, which is what it should be.
Is it your crowning achievement? I mean, is it one of the things you're most proud of out of your entire musical heritage?
Yeah, it is one of the things I'm most proud of, Some albums I'm more proud of than others, and this was a labor of love. And recently, I listened to it back to back for the first time in a long time, and yes, I was quite proud of it. I thought, it did work. Some of it could have been better, but on the whole, I thought that it didn't miss the mark of what I sought out to accomplish,
Right.
And that's true of some of my albums, not all of them,
But that's the typical artist lament is with anytime I interview somebody, they always go, oh, I could have done this better. We could have sang that better. We could have hit this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? I mean, which is probably why it's sort of maddening for...
But when you're doing it, it's hard. It's hard to do it any better. You're doing pretty much the best you can under the circumstances, and there are always circumstances. There's always battles to fight. Even when it's flowing, then some things don't flow always the way you want it to. There are certain obstacles, whether physical or whatever, and or logistical. And then there are also obstacles in the medium, the medium of recording itself. I've never been fond of that medium. I've always struggled all my life to make peace with it. And to this day, I have not found any real answers. Although I'm very, very well versed in the recording process, and I know the ins and outs and the tools of the trade, but there are certain things. To me, it's always like such a huge compromise. I always feel like you end up with something that's almost like matchbox size, whereas in reality it's so much bigger, and it just feels so much different when you're really doing it. I never hear a fraction of that which I'm hearing inside. I never hear it on the finished product. I get glimpses of it at best.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm no fan of recording. It's painful to me because of that process.
Well, and I'm trying to think back. It was either Aristotle or Plato who had summarized about, you can't get that picture that's in your head on the canvas. It's never going to be the pure art, right? It gets frustrating. And of course, you're right. It's a compromise between band members, budgets, record companies, the timeline, deadlines. It's amazing that anything gets done, quite frankly.
That album, I was pretty much the master of my own universe, so to speak. There I had this beautiful studio in this really large mansion in Wales, and I was lucky to be able to do that, to hire orchestras, to have infinite amounts of time. It was other things I was struggling with, like we mentioned before, where the blend, and to make that happen. And I was also always struggling with stereo. I know we only have two ears, but when I'm listening to the sound of an instrument, say a guitar, in a room, it always sounds infinitely better than what I'm hearing off a two-track in the end, no matter how expensive my microphones, and I did use the best microphones in the world. I had the rooms, I used the best amps, best guitars, whatever. Still, it's always, to me, just, I don't know, it's always disappointing,
Yeah,
I don't know whether I should actually even share that with anybody, because it might make people think I've got a screw loose, or they're not hearing something that I'm hearing. But it's just the truth,
Right.
It's just the truth, and there's not much I can do about that.
and I know we've gone way over time.
It's more easy these days, because I've kind of given up that insane struggle. And I hope that the results will hopefully be just as good, maybe in some ways better, because it's more relaxed. But we will see, Sorry, I cut you short.
No, but I was going to ask...
One of my pet subjects,
Since you mentioned that, and you're getting sort of... you're liberating yourself from all those constraints. Is there a new album on the way? Or are you?
Yeah, it's partially because of my dislike of finalizing things in the studio, because I'm always too aware of the imperfections. I've got a huge amount of what I consider some of my best music in the drawer, which partially recorded, unfinished, etc., etc., etc. And it so happens that I've written a complete new album like in 2011 and 2012, and I still haven't gotten around to actually recording it. But I've made a resolution that I'm going to change that now because I want that album to be out. It needs to be done. It's like it's like giving birth, and it really needs to be done. And we're taking one positive step towards that because I want to do it in a band environment, recorded almost live, like we did the Scorpions Revisited. That was actually a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. We didn't do that in the normal studio approach, like layering, one thing after the next to perfection and maybe over-layering it. No, we were actually playing it all live, and it felt great and spontaneous. So I'm going to, during this tour, on the sound checks, we're going to actually start rehearsing some of these new songs with a view to recording them later on, and so then that'll be the first step,
You sort of described the normal artistic struggle of trying to birth something and trying to get it out there. Is there any fear when you release something? Because there's always going to be a critic. There's always going to be a fan or a journalist or somebody who's going to find something wrong. Does that bother you, or at this point?
Oh no, I'm pretty seasoned. Okay. I mean, I guess I'm like anyone. I don't like seeing something torn to pieces that I hold dear, but at the same time, horses for courses, and it's people's opinions. Usually or very often, the critics are very generous with me, and they have been on the last album. It had phenomenal responses, and sometimes, I get some flack, and, I take that in a very stoic manner. So I no, I'm not afraid of releasing anything. It's only when I'm not happy with an album, or when it's not finished, or when I feel that it's not ready to be out there, then I would feel some trepidation, But once I put the finishing mark, the final kind of brushstroke on it, and say, okay, that's it, that's the album, then no, I'm not afraid. Then I want to go forward, and release it. So, something always falls by the wayside, and I see these things in a very philosophical way. They're all part of a journey. And for every critic out there who maybe doesn't like it, there are always people in my camp who've been long-time followers of what I do, who seem to get it. No matter what I do, they seem to like it. Some have preferences for that, some for that. But, hey, that's me. That's what you get. What they're getting when they're, getting my album. They know that it's always like something they didn't expect, and I'm not doing that on purpose. It's just the way it comes out.
I gotta say, the Scorpions. Speaking of unexpected, the Scorpions Revisited. When it first came across the desk, I thought, oh boy, why are we doing this? And,
of course. Yeah, that's the first question I would ask.
and because
I was actually talked into it. That's
I can
why.
imagine. But I can also, the voice.
And then I've been enjoying it.
Well, Klaus's voice is so tied into the Scorpion songs that.
Yes, that's one of the hardest assignments. Yes.
Right, and you found a singer in Nathan James who really delivered believable performances. I mean, you can really get into it and go, okay.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yes.
And
he's great. He is such a great talent, and he just lapped them up. I mean, some of them we hardly spent any time on them, and some of the most difficult ones, like Virgin Killer, were like 2-take scenarios, and that was so difficult to sing. He just completely owned it and nailed it and brought it across.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I'll finish on this because we've been on this for an hour. Out of all the Scorpion albums you've done, which is your masterpiece? Which is the one that you say, okay, this is the best Uli Jon Roth Scorpion album?
Well, it used to be Virgin Killer for me, no contest. Nowadays, with hindsight, I would probably see it slightly differently. I would just pick certain tracks and say those are the ones, rather than just take one definitive album. And if I pick certain tracks, then I have to say there's at least a couple on each one of them, including Flight to the Rainbow, and so that's my answer to that question. And actually, on the Scorpions Revisited, it's pretty much a fair cross section of those which are my favorites. I picked those which I thought would lend themselves best and to represent the essence of what we were doing.
Yeah, and of course, listen, Fly to the Rainbow has got two of my favorite Scorpion songs ever, Speedy's Coming and They Need a Million. I love those two songs. Those are great.
Sometimes play them live. We played them in our acoustic set recently in Athens. And particularly, They Need a Million works well with the Spanish flamenco guitar. That's
brilliant. But I agree with you. I think there's a couple of songs on each that are great, but the favorite, leaving out Tokyo Tapes, has to sort of go back between Taken by Force and In Trance. Those are I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, particularly In Trance has some real moments, and Taken by Force, has at least 4 songs which are among my early Scorpions favorites.
Yeah, and the song In Trance itself is one of the greatest songs ever.
Yes. Yeah, it's become a bit of a cult anthem. Whenever we play that, it really gets to people. And I think we're now playing it better than ever because we, Klaus notwithstanding, of course, you can't replace Klaus with his $1 million voice, which is so unique. But whenever we're doing it now, you can hear all the parts. We have rhythm guitars, we have dual or triple lead guitars, just like it was intended to be. That's the one thing with the Scorpions. We were a great live band, but I always felt we were restricted because we only had 2 guitars live, and on the albums, I used to multi-track quite a bit, harmony guitars here and there, and several rhythm guitars. It was a much more orchestral approach on the albums than we were able to deliver, and wow. I'm not taking away from the Tokyo Tape stuff because it was what it was, but that was one of the things that now I'm able to perform those songs with a different scope because we can hear all the harmonies, and to me it's a slightly richer tapestry, which I prefer to listen to. Some people might disagree, but I just like the colors, the different colors in the sky, I guess.
But the sky. Everything is the sky, right? The Sky Academy, Sky Guitar will burn the sky.
Deliberately, because you said Sky Academy, Sky Guitars, That was my German sense of humor. Right. Which, isn't the greatest because I'm German, but having lived in the UK for so long, I've developed, I think, a good sense of humor.
The British sense of humor. Uli, this has been an absolute pleasure, and of course, we've only touched the tip of the iceberg on this. There's so much more to go through, but I think an hour has been a great hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in Montreal.
Yeah, I'll be probably at Montreal and Ottawa. We got to get out to the Brass Monkey, right? That's the venue to go to, right?
Yeah. Yes. Maybe now we are finished, but you are recording, and maybe you could. One thing we should have mentioned regarding the tour, because we're doing something.
Well, go right ahead. I'm still recording. So.
Yeah, exactly. You could integrate it. There was one point when we were talking about rehearsing the new songs on stage during the sound check.
Yes.
Well, basically, we're now going to do something really new because we're going to offer basically our most diehard fans the opportunity to be at that sound check and get a sneak preview of some of that material. I mean, we're not going to be able to play all of them, but we're working on some of them that might be really interesting. And we also
the acoustic concerts,
performing some of these acoustic songs, yes, and these are available through VIP passes. They've sold quite a few already, so it's people are interested in that. But I wanted to mention that because it's a new departure, and for me it'll be helpful in more than one way. Because when you write stuff at home, it's all good and well. But once you start playing it live, it takes on almost a different dimension. At least with some of the songs, it kind of gets the final kind of cutting edge or whatever. That's my experience. So sometimes songs really come into their full bloom once you start playing it with the help of an audience, because it's the audience is something that it's just a different vibration in the room that you don't get when you're on your own. So basically, that'll help me to crystallize some of these songs, basically rehearsing in front of a small audience,
Yeah. No.
So I just wanted people to be aware of that.
And of course, the VIP passes are at ulijonroth.com. That's where people can go find the information.
The website, and there are different options available for different kinds of pockets. It was interesting to see that by far most people went for the most expensive, called Triple Platinum, which took me by surprise. But not everybody will be able, I guess, to be there, but I'm really looking forward to that aspect of it because, yes, finally we'll be working on these new songs, even on the stage with the whole band, and we'll do that night after night. So by the end of the tour, maybe we will have rehearsed most of the album, hopefully. That would be very interesting.
Would you consider ever recording an album like that in a live setting where you've gone into these rehearsals and on stage and sussed it all out like that?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we will have our recording machine running regardless, and we're also offering a memory stick at the end of the concert with, for the people. Yeah, which will be downloadable because we're not going to be able to mix it there and then, but it'll be mixed pretty soon afterwards. That's become very popular. So we'll record it anyways on multi-track. But the answer to your question is, I'm in two minds about that. A studio album is still a studio album because, there are a lot of colors that you won't be able to reproduce on a one-off live take. So as a base for a studio album, yes, I could see some of that, but I would always want some overdubs afterwards to make it more into like an oil painting rather than a pencil sketch, so to speak.
Right. Well, but of course, the live setting offers its own set of colors and its own.
But it's a different world, and for instance, I have experimented with that because originally I wanted to record it as a full-on live album, the Scorpions Revisited, and then it didn't turn out that way. We recorded at least 30 shows, and there were some real highlights and real moments, but each of the time there was something here, something there. And then our drummer said, look, you're never going to be happy like that. Why don't we go into a controlled environment, meaning a studio, and just play it live there, And while I didn't want the studio because I don't like the sound of studios, the idea of actually doing it in a controlled environment, quote unquote controlled, struck me. So I thought back of this beautiful concert hall that we were privileged to rehearse in with the Scorpions, which was in our hometown of Langenhagen, right next to Hanover. And I rang up our old keyboard player, Achim Kirschning, who was then the headmaster at that school where the concert hall was situated in. And he said, yeah, it's still there. It's still exactly in the same condition as it was at the time of Virgin Killer in Trance. And, I always found that place inspiring. So we actually went there. We went there for 3 days and recorded the entire thing in 3 afternoons, I think, 3 or 3.5. Just playing through the set several times, and then afterwards I was able to just pick the best. And yeah, there was our album, So we recorded it kind of live, but there wasn't an audience. But it was almost like there was an audience in spirit, if there was in a concert hall. It just felt great. And it's maybe that place I want to go back to record the next album.
The next one, but and I'll just finish on this. But some of the greatest songs ever are great because they have some imperfections, right? And that's what's great about right.
Yeah, I hope you don't get me wrong with the entire talk about perfection. When it comes to sonics and sound, I've got a chip on my shoulder, and I am always craving perfection, and I never get it. And that is idiotic. I'm aware of that. So, but yeah, I know when enough is enough. I've always been conscious not to gild the lily, as you would say in America, over gild the lily. No, there needs to be a cutoff point, and I have left many an imperfection on the albums. When I'm talking about the frustration, it is always related to the fact that I think it should sound so much better than what it does on the finished product. It's always that. It's not so much the playing. With the playing, I'm usually quite happy. The rendition, the phrasings, etc. It's the other stuff.
Right. Because just to me, that's, for example, we're talking about live shows also. That to me is what makes a great live show. When there's an accidental feedback or right? It's live, and that there's blood, sweat, and tears. The whole backing tapes and. It's like, oh, come on now, just play. I love that.
I love the danger element of live. Every night I'm taking so many chances, and one night there'll be a song that I've played a million times before, and I'll do it completely differently, sure. and I thrive on that. It doesn't always work, but when it works, then you've got something, And
even if it doesn't, sometimes if it falls flat, it falls flat. So what? That's live. That's the excitement as a fan, is to go see that interpretation. And most of
it's almost like I see it like a family occasion. People come there, and it's a big deal for them for people to even go out of their way to go to a gig. They have to drive long distance sometimes, through the snow or whatever, and the bad weather, and then they're there, and they're coming to be part of something, and I don't take that for granted, and so I'm always trying to have this oneness with the audience. Basically, we're all experiencing that journey together at that moment. I just happen to be the conduit, and so I have a feeling when it really works, you build up a certain magic in the room, which is inexplicable, and it's kind of that journey. And yes, some songs may not be that exciting in themselves, but they lead to the next one, and then the next one, and then at certain points in the gig or the concert, you get these high points where it all comes together, and you can't get that any other way. You have to travel the journey, If you only take that high point, then that high point isn't quite the same,
And that's what I love about these club shows is some of the big arena shows, the corporate rock, as we spoke about.
Yeah, you don't get that in the arena as much.
And there's backing tracks and there's triggers.
No, the smaller shows will give you that, and then it'll give you the complete access towards that immediacy. And you can feel it right there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Uli, again, great pleasure. And I can keep going.
You always Another round, no.
I'm ready for round 2, round 3, but
yeah.
the VIP packages are over at ulijonroth.com, and of course, you're coming to Montreal in March, April 1st, in Ottawa at the Brass Monkey, and
I'm also coming to Vancouver for the first time. Looking forward to that. I've never played that part of Canada.
You've never been to Vancouver?
Yeah, no, I should have been. There were several times it was on the agenda. They never happened. So this is actually the first time.
Well, just forgetting that I'm Canadian for a minute, Vancouver is one of the nicest towns or cities to visit. It is clean. It's got culture. It's got, the food. Just everything. The mountains. You're gonna love it.
Now I'm really looking forward to it.
No, it's gorgeous.
About it, yes. But also Montreal. what a city. Canada has a lot going for it. And the people are ever so nice. Yep. I'm looking forward to that part. And this time it's hopefully the weather will be a little more civilized.
Well, by the end of March, it should be.
We can't count on it, but let's hope.
The last time I missed you because I was having heart surgery. This time, nothing is scheduled, so I am definitely going to be there.
Right.
Very, very, very much looking forward to it. So thank you.
I thank you, Mitch.
And there you have it, folks, my interview with guitar legend Uli Jon Roth. Head over to ulijonroth.com for all your Uli needs, including information on the upcoming tour, the VIP packages, and more. I also encourage you to head over to Twitter. At Mitch Lafon is where you can find me and follow me if you're interested in all my wonderful ramblings. I will also mention that I have a pair of tickets to give away to Black Sabbath in Montreal on February 23rd, 2016. For that, you head over to the One-on-One with Mitch Lafon Facebook page, like the page, and then send me a note stating why you would like to go to the show. Thank you, folks. Bye for now.